What is your name?
Walter Callis.
Where were you born and when?
I was born in Strong, Pennsylvania in September 9th, 1926.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Strong, Pennsylvania till I was out of school, and then I went into service.
Where all have you lived?
Well, I lived most of my life in New Jersey, and I worked for a power company in New Jersey, and then my wife and I retired about the same time we moved down here to North Carolina.
So you moved here pretty recently?
No, I've been down here since 1980, 89, I think, or no, 89 I believe it was.
What jobs have you had?
Well, after I got out of the service, I went to work for an electrical contractor, and I was with him for 2 or 3 years, and then I got a job with the power company in Washington, D.C., and I trained down there. I was a lineman for the power company in Washington, D.C.
Did you enjoy that?
Very much. It was outdoor work, and I really did enjoy it.
What were some of the specific tasks like you would have to complete?
Well, I had to take that line training, and I did some college work, but I never graduated from college. But anyway, some of the other tasks I had were taking care of my family and the house.
You said you served in the military. What branch were you in?
I was in the Marine Corps.
Where did you serve?
Well, I went to boot training down in Parris Island, South Carolina. And then I went to New River, North Carolina for further training. After that, went on troop train out to California to Camp Pendleton. And then we boarded a ship there, and we sailed down to the South Pacific to an island down there called Guadalcanal. And we trained some more down there, and then we got on shipboard again and went up, and I fought the Japanese on Okinawa.
Do you have any stories from that?
Well, there was quite a few stories I have from Okinawa. Yes, we were in some tight spots, and I was at one point I was attached to the 6th Tank Battalion, they called it. And we used to go out in front of the tanks and make sure there's no mines out there that would disable the tanks. And that was a pretty hazardous duty. We were right out in front, and sometimes we had to crawl out there to look for mines. And we had one fella killed and one wounded out of 6 of us. And but then I went from there. We boarded ship, and they had dropped the atomic bomb in Japan, and we got the word that Japan was going to surrender, and we boarded ship again, and we went up to Japan, and we stayed on board ship for 2 weeks, and then I woke up one morning and went out on deck, and there's the big Missouri there, the battleship Missouri. And we were inside Tokyo Bay, and the Japanese had marked all their guns down on the side hills with big white flags. And then we landed on a peninsula in Japan called Yokosuka, and that's where the Japanese trained their pilots to bomb and torpedo there at Pearl Harbor. And while we were there, we released some of American prisoners that were taken prisoner by Japan. After that, I went back to the United States, and I was discharged from the Marines, and it was above Chicago, a camp above Chicago. And then I went from there. I went home and got a job.
Do you have any other stories from that?
No, not really. I've got son and a daughter, and my daughter lives in New Jersey, and my son lives out in Wisconsin. And I have grandchildren and great-grandchildren, really.
How do you think some of your experiences in the service affected you?
Well, I grew up pretty much in the service. Learned a lot of things about life and death too.
So you can remember some of the major battles like Pearl Harbor or some of the ones in World War II?
Well, I wasn't in the service during Pearl Harbor, but I went in later on.
Can you remember when those happened?
Oh yes, I do. And when we left California by ship, we went to Pearl Harbor, but we didn't get off the ship. We stayed aboard ship and went down to Guadalcanal. And on Okinawa, I was in a second landing with the tank battalion. We landed further down the island, and that was pretty hazardous duty.
Why did you decide to move to North Carolina?
Well, when my wife and I retired about the same time, and we looked, my wife rode away to some people that were suggesting different sites to different places to retire to. And Lenore, North Carolina, was listed. We had traveled down the Parkway during our vacations, and this is one of the places that they recommended to move to. It was Lenore. And I looked on the map and I saw it was close to the Parkway where we used to travel. So we decided to move down here, and I like the mountains. My wife and I both like mountains and just the country around here.
How different was the area from what you were used to?
Well, the town I lived in looked like it was hit by bombs because it was a coal region. It was stripped of coal, and as a matter of fact, when I was a teenager, I worked with some coal miners, and a friend of mine and I used to hoist the coal out.
What were some of the changes you had to make?
Well, when I went in the service, they make the changes for you. And then when I got out, and I had to find a job, I went down to Washington, D.C., and then I was eating in the restaurants down there, having all my meals in the restaurants, and I was getting sick sometimes, and I decided this is not for me, and I went back to Pennsylvania. My sister invited me to come down to New Jersey, and I went to New Jersey and got a job with the power company.
Can you describe the area from where you grew up?
Yes, like I said, that area was dug up all over the place. They strip mined for coal. They had shovels out on the mountains and digging for coal.
Do you have any siblings?
Well, my sister, she passed away. She was a nurse also, and she's the one that invited me down to New Jersey.
Did you enjoy playing games with her?
Oh, yes. Yes.
So you were really close to her?
Well, not really. She was a bit older than me, and she moved from Pennsylvania down to New Jersey after she was married.
Where you grew up, were there ever any local gatherings that the community would come together?
Well, as kids, we used to gather at spots, and have fun.
What were some of the things you would do?
We just hang around and talk most of the time, but sometimes in the afternoon we'd play football and baseball.
What things would your family do for entertainment?
Well, my father worked away quite a bit, so my family didn't do an awful lot, although we would travel down to where his people lived in Western Maryland, and we used to have fun down there too, on the farms.
What kind of chores did you have when you were young?
Well, like I said, I worked with the fellows in the coal mines. I didn't work inside, but I used to work there quite a bit.
Can you think of any stories from that?
Well, we had a friend that was in one of the mines that was close to ours, and he had a big chunk of coal come down, broke his leg, and broke the upper bone in his leg, and his leg ended up a half-inch shorter than the other one. He was drafted in the Army and was killed in the Philippines.
Can you think of any other stories?
Well,
where did you go to school?
Well, at the lower grades, I went to school in Strong, PA. They had three-room schoolhouse there. And then when at 7th grade, after we finished 7th, we moved over to a high school that was in a different town, and I was in there till I graduated.
Were you ever involved in any sports or clubs?
I played a little football with the team, but it didn't last very long.
How big was the school?
Not real big. I guess the senior class there was just about 100 kids.
What were your main interests in school?
In school?
Yeah.
Shop, I guess it was, when working down in the shop, making things, wood products. You know.
What did you enjoy learning about?
Well, I'm a history buff. I like history. I guess that was my best subject.
Did you have any holiday traditions growing up?
Well, the usual ones, Easter and Christmas and birthdays.
Do you have any hobbies or things you enjoy doing?
Well, I'm with the Caldwell County Honor Guard, and we're quite busy with veterans' funerals.
When did you start doing that?
I started about 2 years ago.
What all kinds of things do you do?
Well, I have a little dog that keeps me busy, and I do a lot of reading, and I've got a computer I work with. That's about it.
What kind of things do you enjoy to read?
Well, I like military books and stuff like that, mainly.
Can you think of any other stories from childhood?
Where I lived in the wintertime, and we had a lot of fun sleigh riding and ice skating. Sometimes we broke through the ice.
Do you know anything about your last name, the history?
My family?
Yes. Your last name, where it would have came from, your ancestors?
Well, it's an English name. They originated in England. And I had quite a few relatives that lived in Western Maryland. And we'd go and visit those people. And they all had farms. And I liked living on a farm in the summertime, between school.
Do you enjoy being outside?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Were they like animal farms?
Well, they had, they used to raise corn and animals. Not very big on animals. They mostly planted.
Did you ever help with any of the chores while you were there in the summer?
Oh, yes, I used to help. We used to bring the hay in from the field. They'd stack the hay in the field and for drying, and the stacks would be maybe 15 foot high, and we'd throw a chain around it. And my sister and I, that's something we did together, we'd drag that big pile of hay into the barn, and they'd put it up in the loft.
Do you have any stories from being there in the summer?
Well, when I was just a young kid, my cousin and I, they had a stream running through their barn, and we used to try to dam that up, make a place to paddle around in, but we were never too successful with that. We used to ride the horses once in a while, but my uncle looked down on that because he wanted to use them for work. He didn't want to tire those animals out.
Do you like animals? Did you like?
Oh, yes.
Do you have any family keepsakes or heirlooms?
Well, the one that I value a lot is I've got a samurai sword I took from a Japanese soldier, and I've got that at home. Not a lot of other things I have. I had some souvenirs that I brought home from Okinawa, but I gave them all to my son.
Do you have any pictures or scrapbooks of your family?
Oh, yes.
When were they made?
Well, probably it was continuous, when they were growing up and all through that period of time.
Whose pictures are in them?
Oh, my son and my daughter and their friends and some relatives I have.
Are there any other stories you would like to?
We had just come back from a drill, and we were in the sand between these big barracks they were. And we had 72 men in each barracks, and there was lines of them. The sand was real loose, and these buildings were set up on cinder blocks, and they were about 2 feet off the sand. And we had 2 doors in the building, one on each end. and there was a little porch, a 2-step porch at each doorway. And there was 72 of us in the platoon. And when that drill instructor yelled fall out, we had to run for those doors. Half the platoon would go in one door and half in the other. And we had everything on, helmets, backpacks, rifles, cartridge belts, we had everything, helmets. And when he hollered dismiss, or fall out, he yelled, I was on the corner of the one platoon nearest the door, and we had to run. They wouldn't allow us to walk any place. And I hit that porch, and my leg went through the porch. And I laid there, and half of that platoon went over my back, and they were tripping on my pack, and guys were flying all over, and the rifles were going all over the place. And I thought drill instructor was going to be mad at me and when the last man went in, I looked up, and the tears are running down his face. He's laughing that hard. And I'll never forget that.
What kind of things would you do while you were in training?
We do calisthenics first thing in the morning after we had our breakfast, and I was picked to fight in a ring or to do boxing. And I had 6 fights there. They'd form a big ring, and we'd go in there on the sand. And I had 6 fights there, and then I had another fight. The last one I had was in a ring where a lot of people were there, and a lot of people from the company and from the island itself they were. And that was the last one I had. Then we hiked out to the rifle range, what they call a rifle range, and there we had training with targets. We'd fire at the targets out there.
Were you ever in any scary situation?
Oh yeah, many.
Were you ever hands-on, with the Japanese, or was it more distant fighting?
Well, one where I got that sword, we were close. It was a close fight.
Was it just the 6 that was in your group, or was it more?
Yeah, the 6 of us were together, and we were spread out in shell holes for protection. We jumped in these shell holes for protection. And I just happened to be the nearest one to where these Japanese came up. And I saw the first one, and I jumped out of the hole. I yelled to the other people, and I ran over on the side first, and that's where I got the sword at.
What kind of weapons were used?
Well, I had what they call a BAR, Browning Automatic Rifle, and most of the men carried an M1, what they call an M1 rifle.
Do the Japanese have the same kind of?
They had rifles and machine guns. They lived in caves quite a bit. For their protection, for one thing, they stayed in these caves. Come out during the day.
You said you had a son and a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Where do they live?
Well, my son lives in Wisconsin, and my daughter lives in New Jersey. Well, I was born in Pennsylvania, in what they call the anthracite coal region. The coal was real hard, and it was just like glass, some of it, black glass. And there was a couple of fellas had a coal mine that the coal company used to allow people to take the coal out from the surface if they sold the coal to the company. Well, a friend of mine and I were both teenagers, and we were working with 2 older fellas that opened one of these mines. And what our job was to take and hoist the coal out on a windlass, what they call a windlass. And then when we got a bucket of coal, when we hoisted it out, we'd dump it on a platform. And when we had, I think it was 63 drums of coal we hoisted out, then that was equivalent of a load of coal. So after the last one came up, usually the truck that hauled it had us timed, and he'd come in at that time. He'd back into a platform that we had been dumping the coal on, and we'd load the truck with coal, with the coal that we had hoisted out. And then they would take it up to where the coal company had a railroad station there, where they had coal cars there, and they would dump the coal. We would dump the coal into the coal car, and they had a man standing there, and if he thought the coal was a little dirty or something like that, he'd take some money away from us, you know. And but anyway, our job was not only to hoist the coal out and load the truck. We also prepared. We'd cut the timber. They had to put timber down. And they'd take so much coal out, and they'd have to put timber in to hold the rock, keep the top from coming down, you know. And then they would also, when we got all the coal out, the miners would bore a hole up in the coal, and they'd put dynamite in there for the next day, and they'd light the fuse, and then they'd climb out, and then the dynamite would blow some more coal out, and a lot of smoke would come out of there. Couldn't go back in again. So we'd leave it like that. The next day, the smoke would always clear out. But another job of ours was, besides cutting that timber, we had to prepare the dynamite for the fellas. And the dynamite, we used to be able to buy it in a grocery store. And what we did is we lay it, they'd want a half a stick of dynamite. We lay it on a piece of wood, take a hatchet and cut it in half. And then we'd put the cap on the end of the fuse and crimp that on there with your teeth. And it was real sensitive stuff. And we'd put that in the dynamite and fasten it so it would stay there. And then we'd send that down to them. And they'd push that up where they had drilled in. They'd push that up there and they'd tamp it real hard. Put dirt bags behind it, pack it in tight. Then they'd light the fuse, and then they'd come up out of the hole. And it'd just go like a boom, like that. And we had our coal for the next day. But then they'd, as they say, we loaded the trucks and we hoisted the coal out, prepared all that other stuff, loaded the trucks for $2 a load. And but we had fun too. We had a lot of fun. But that's what I worked at for quite a while. And then my friend and I, we got a job. Store had burnt down in this town of Mount Carmel, and this elderly gentleman, he bought the store as it was, and he hired us to clean it up. And he had pickup trucks, and we would load those pickup trucks with a pile of trash in the middle of that building. Looked like a mountain. That was so big, you know. It took us a long time to haul it all out. And then after that, we worked for him because he had a contract with the coal company to build power lines so they could get their shovels out on the mountain and open the mine up, you know, dig all the dirt off the top. And we used to set the poles and run the wire and everything for him after that. And but I learned afterward how to climb a pole, and then I used to climb the poles and I put the rigging up there for the wire. So that's about all I did in Pennsylvania. And then when I got out of the service, I went down to Washington, D.C., and I went to a line school down there where they taught you to climb and poles and stuff like that, how to handle yourself. And I worked down in Washington, D.C. for about a year. And then I got tired of eating in all these restaurants because half the time I'd get sick, you know. So I just left there and I went back to Pennsylvania. And my sister, she talked me into going down to New Jersey, and I went down there and got a job with the power company down there. And that's where I met my wife, down in New Jersey. And she was a nurse. And she had operating room techniques that she studied. And then she passed away in 2006. She passed away. And she was 4 years in a nursing home up there at the Sheriff Center. We had a good married life. I miss her terribly, but twice we traveled around the country, around all the different states. We had been in all the states plus up into Canada. It was a good life, and I miss her terribly.